Hey, what's going on everyone? So in this video, we're going to talk about 10 different active recall study techniques that you can use if you want to incorporate active recall for memorizing anything, whether that's school or your personal life or anything like that. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is actually testing yourself before you learn the concept. What I would do in some of my classes is before class, you take a look at the actual lesson outline, whether that's for any class you have, and you basically test yourself on the concept because there are some classes that overlap with other classes. And test yourself to see if you could actually understand what the content is before you learn it, before you even read over it. Test yourself on the concept. Most of the time when it comes to classes, you're going to get all these questions wrong, and that's okay. You're just putting yourself in the environment where you are going to be tested so that in class, when things come up, you remember it, so that when you test yourself before class, you go look at what you got wrong or what you got right, and you compare and contrast, and then that way you're able to fill out the gaps in the information that you don't know. So when you go to class and your teacher or your professor explains it, you have a better understanding of everything that is taking place because you already tested yourself before going to class. Now the next thing is in-class questions. So now that we've already tested ourselves before learning, now we want to actually ask the questions in class. Now keep in mind that asking the questions in class is better equipped when you've already tested yourself before or familiarized yourself with the content before class. This is very, very important for also creating a good friendship and a good relationship between you and your professor, so that in the end of the year, if you do want to bump in your grade or you want a reference letter, this is going to be very beneficial. So while you're actually in class and the professor starts asking questions, try to answer those questions. And don't forget, if you tested yourself before, answering these questions in class would be very, very easy because you've already seen the information before. But it doesn't only stop there. Don't forget that once class is done, the professor will always have time where you can go and ask some questions. Go and ask some questions, things that you don't understand or things that you want them to rephrase. This is super, super important because when you go out of your way to try to learn a specific concept, rather than, rereading or highlighting something, when you actively try to go out of your way to learn something, that helps solidify it better in your memory, and that is something actually called neuroplasticity, and that is how over time the strength between neurons will actually get stronger over time when you use them actively, not passively. Now the next thing is image occlusions. Now you guys might have not heard this term before, but if you use Anki for studying like flashcards, then you could have probably heard of this term before. Essentially what image occlusions are is where you take a diagram. So let's say it's anatomy, okay, and there are a bunch of different namings. So if you guys have ever taken anatomy, then you know that there is a lot of things that you need to name on actual exams. Or if you've taken metabolism, you know that the Krebs cycle, glycolysis, you know that there are so many things that you have to memorize. So image occlusion is essentially where you cover up the terms and you try to figure out what the answers are. So for example, let's say it was glycolysis. We know that glycolysis starts with glucose, and then I think it's glucose 6-phosphate. I don't remember very well, and then something bisphosphate. My point is there are a lot of steps that take place when you're trying to memorize a concept like this. So something that is very beneficial is if you actually cover one of these words and you try to remember over time. You could start by only covering one and going through the cycle, then covering 2, then covering 3, then 4, then 5. The next thing you know, you have the whole cycle memorized, or you have the whole diagram memorized. Now the next method is actually teaching the concept back to yourself. Now someone once told me when I was younger that you only understand the information very, very well if you can explain it to a 4-year-old. And that is actually really, really true, because you can take the concept that you learn and change it, make it simpler or more complex depending on the audience. Now this is really, really important, because if you cannot also explain it to yourself, then how will you be able to formalize it or write it down into words in your exam or in your assessment? So this is really, really important. Once you've finished learning the information at home or in the library or whatever, test yourself, whether that's while you're walking or while you're at home pacing. What I like to do is actually pacing. Now I remember in second year university for my microbiology exam, it was a very big exam. It was like 65% of our grade, 100 questions. I remember like I could only get like 7 questions wrong if I wanted to end the course with a 90, which was actually really, really hard. And before the exam, what I did is I learned the information, of course, through flashcards, and then just to make sure that I really understand the information, I used to actually pace in my house and recite all the information, everything that I knew relating to a concept. And that is really, really important, because again, if you cannot teach it to yourself, then you actually don't know the information very, very well. Now the next thing is toggle lists. Now this is something that I use really, really often in Notion. In Notion, there is actually a setting where you could create a title for a specific concept or a title in general, and you put all the information under it. So this is similar to where you would essentially look at a word and explain everything that relates to it. So for example, let's say we would say, the cell, the eukaryotic cell. So I would see that title and I would explain everything that relates to it. You know, ribosomes, small ribosomes, large ribosomes, Golgi bodies, nucleus, DNA. I would basically explain everything relating to the cell, and then once I finished, I would untoggle the list and you check everything to make sure you finished it. And if you've missed something, then start it or highlight it red or something like that, so that the next time over you essentially know what you missed last time and you could be aware of that and make sure that you don't fall into that same trap of missing that specific information. Now the next one is fill in the blanks, and this is actually something I use on Anki very often. And this is essentially where you would explain a specific concept, but you would cover a specific keyword. So an example of a fill in the blank could be like, you know, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So a fill in the blank could either be that I cover mitochondria, so just it's the powerhouse of the cell, or I would actually cover powerhouse of the cell and I would make mitochondria is, and then there would be this fill in the blank. Now this actually brings me to my next option, which is flashcards. Now flashcards, as you guys definitely know, I use a lot, and I use it for most of my subjects that have to do with memorization or understanding. Now flashcards are very important, and you can make flashcards at home. A lot of people like making their own flashcards at home because it helps them solidify that information in their head. Personally, I like using Anki, which is an online software that is very smart, and it allows you to do flashcards on the go, on your phone, on your iPad, on your MacBook. So it is a very smart software, and if you're interested in using Anki, definitely check out my Anki playlist linked above right here. But if you guys don't want to use Anki, there are definitely other options like making it by yourself, by hand, or using Quizlet. And there is actually another platform online that I saw called Remno, and Remno is actually made by other doctors. Their names are Mike and Maddie. They actually have their own YouTube channel as well. I'll link it down below in the description and above right here. But essentially flashcards are very important, and if you guys aren't using them right now, I would highly recommend that you guys use flashcards. Now the next option is rewriting the concepts, and this is actually what my sister Marina likes doing and one of my friends likes doing as well. Both of them like writing out the concept because it helps solidify that information in their head. Now if you think about it, the only difference between rewriting concepts and teaching it to yourself is that one is out loud and one is on paper. So this basically comes down to your preference. Which one do you prefer? I personally like teaching it to myself because this is quicker, but rewriting it down, I could understand why a lot of people would like that, where they take all their really nice pens, you know, and they underline specific things and bold specific things. At the end of the day, as long as you're retrieving the information from your memory and you're putting it into words, or you're conceptualizing it, or you're saying it out loud, that's really all that matters. The whole point of active recall is that you grab the information, you take it out of your head, and you use it in whatever way possible. And this applies to anything. All that matters is really the retrieval part of active recall. That's really all that matters. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually mind maps. Now mind maps is very similar to actually toggle list. The only difference is that you keep expanding on the topics and relate them to one another. So this helps create a very good understanding of how all the concepts are related together, and it helps, I guess, solidify it much better. So for example, let's come back to the cell example. If you write cell on your piece of paper, you're going to write all the organelles under it. So like lysosome, nucleus, small endoplasmic reticulum, large endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi body, peroxisomes, other lysosomes, mitochondria, I don't know if I said that, plasma membrane. You would essentially write everything relating to the eukaryotic cell. Then you take it one step further, explain what the mitochondria does, explain what the nucleus does, or what it has in it, explain the small and large endoplasmic reticulum, and so on and so forth. And you would essentially keep expanding, and this would help solidify the information and help create the connections between all the information on a piece of paper. And finally, this is practice tests. And in my opinion, this is non-negotiable. Practice tests are the way to do good on your exams. You have to put yourself in that testing environment and time yourself properly to ensure that you do good on your exam. I have a bunch of videos talking about practice exams and how they're very important, or practice tests in general, and how they actually lead to better performance on test day. There are significant differences between how you perform at home on a practice test versus how you perform in the actual exam in school, in a classroom, online, whatever the case. You have to do practice tests for all your exams because this is the way that you actually do good on your exams, and this is how you become successful. A lot of students, including myself, make the mistake, or I made the mistake a lot in high school, where I didn't do practice tests. Now, I'm sure what you might be thinking, well, my class doesn't offer practice tests. There are a bunch of questions online for any class you have, and even if they don't offer practice tests, you can make your own based on questions that they give you. Time yourself, figure out the structure for the exam, ask the professor, go back to the example of asking the professor questions, ask them what the exam structure is, make your own exam structure based on your own questions, and answer them yourself at home. This is the way to do well on your exams, and if you guys aren't doing this, trust me, if you do this, you will most definitely perform better on your exams and you will do better in school. Now, if you guys have any questions relating to any of these concepts, please put them in the comments down below and I would be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope it helped. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care and take it easy.